Empowering Indigenous women in business is a growing movement that seeks to create a more diverse and inclusive business climate for women of Indigenous descent. Indigenous women have long been underrepresented in the business world, and this movement seeks to change that by providing resources, support, and education to Indigenous women who are looking to become entrepreneurs and business owners. Indigenous women have a unique set of challenges and experiences that can make it difficult for them to access the same resources and opportunities available to non-Indigenous business owners. These challenges include a lack of access to capital, limited access to education and training, and a lack of representation in the business world. Additionally, many Indigenous women have experienced discrimination and marginalization due to their gender, race, and culture. The goal of the Empowering Indigenous Women in Business movement is to create a more equitable and inclusive business climate for Indigenous women. This includes providing resources and support to help Indigenous women build successful businesses, as well as advocating for policy changes and increased representation in the business world. One way the movement is working to empower Indigenous women is by providing resources, support, and education. There are a number of organizations and initiatives that work to provide resources to Indigenous women, such as the First Nations Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, FNWI, and the Indigenous Women's Business Network, IWBN. These organizations provide training, mentorship, and access to capital for Indigenous women business owners. Additionally, there are a number of online resources, such as the Indigenous Women's Business Network's website and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses' Indigenous Women in Business website. The Empowering Indigenous Women in Business movement also works to increase representation of Indigenous women in the business world. This includes advocating for policies that support Indigenous women business owners, such as tax breaks and access to capital, as well as working to increase the visibility of Indigenous women in the business world. This includes initiatives such as the IWBN's Indigenous Women in Business Awards program, which recognizes and celebrates the success of Indigenous women business owners. Ultimately, the goal of the Empowering Indigenous Women in Business movement is to create a more equitable and inclusive business climate for Indigenous women. This includes providing resources, support, and education to Indigenous women business owners, as well as advocating for policy changes and increased representation in the business world. By working together, we can create a more diverse and inclusive business climate that celebrates and supports the success of Indigenous women in business.